So I'd like to invite our keynote speaker for this conference, Bob Bates. He's an industry veteran. He's been designing games before a lot of us were born. I think his contribution to this industry is, if I had to start talking about it, it would take us a while. So look up Bob Bates. And he's been a very integral part of the games industry when it was in the US, when it was really tiny and perhaps tinier than where we are in India today. And he's been an integral part of growing the conference in the US and being part of the influential think tank of designers who've kind of defined the industry over the years. Bob, all yours.
Everyone. I'd like to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to come and speak here today. It's a wonderful looking crowd. I'd like to thank Zynga for sponsoring my trip here. This is only the second time that I've ever been to India, and it's just an amazing and wonderful place. My name is Bob Bates, and I started writing games in 1986 for a company called Infocom. And in those days, this was the days before computers had graphics. So I wrote text adventures where you input a sentence into the machine and a sentence comes back to you. In 1989, I started a company called Legend Entertainment, and these are 4 games that I designed and wrote and sometimes coded for Legend Entertainment. I was also the president of Legend Entertainment, also a producer and co-producer on a bunch of different titles. And these are some of the games that we produced in the early 1990s. These were mostly graphic adventures. And then in the mid-1990s, the adventure game genre kind of died. And so our studio made a transition to first-person shooters, which was a kind of a weird transition for us, but it's it's a kind of game that our team members like to play. And so we started to do shooters, and I actually wrote and produced Unreal 2. And then in 2004, we closed Legend Entertainment, and for 6 years I was an independent consultant, just traveling the world, working with companies all over the world to help them design their games. And this is a set of games that I worked on during that period of time. And then in 2010, my old partner from Zynga called me up and said, hey, we need somebody who knows something a little bit about storytelling. Would you come to work for Zynga? And so I worked for Zynga for a little over 3 years as their chief creative officer for their North American studios outside of San Francisco. And so in that role, I touched many, many games. A lot of what Zynga was producing at the time, but there were 3 games in particular that I worked on extensively. One was Frontierville, one was Empires and Allies, both of which did very well, and then Mafia Wars 2, which didn't do quite so well. So this is sort of a visual resume of the last 28 years of what I've been doing. And now I'm very happily back to being an independent consultant. I'm here in India right now working with Zynga Studio I on a new IP. I have other projects in the pipeline. So that's just sort of a quick introduction to some of the work that I've done through the years. So there's this myth in our industry that creativity is the exclusive province of game designers and artists. But in point of fact, it's not true. And this talk is designed for everyone who's involved with game development. Everybody involved with game development needs to bring their own creativity to the job. Producers, writers, programmers, QA testers, marketing people, executives, salesmen. Everybody needs to be creative and feel that satisfaction that comes from being creative in their jobs. So why is this important? For a while I was the chair of the IGDA, and we discovered that every year thousands of people come into the industry with their eyes full of hopes and dreams, believing that they found their dream job and looking for ways to use their creativity in their work. And we did, at the IGDA, we did 2 surveys spread across by 4 different years of who are the people in the industry, what are they doing, and that sort of thing. And we made a startling discovery, and that was that of the thousands of people who come in every year, after 5 years, if I can click, 5 years later, half of them are gone. So what's happening there? People are coming into the industry, they're very excited, they're starting to work, and they're discovering that this isn't their dream job. So the business cost of this is staggering, because as businesses, we bring people in, we train them, only to find them to go away. But the human cost is also horrific. Here are people who've studied game development, who think that this is what they want to do with their lives, and they start into work and they discover that it's not for them, and suddenly they find they have to make another plan, they have to abandon their dream, and they end up getting out of the industry, and that's a really bad thing. So it turns out, especially for you students, that getting into the industry is not that hard. Getting a job in the game industry isn't that difficult. What is difficult is making a career in the game industry. It's finding the value in your work that prompts you to want to stay and keep doing what you're doing. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is being creative. So here are some of the issues. Anybody who wants to be creative in any field is going to face problems. Creative people have difficulty finding meaning in their work. They have to deal with rejection. They have to survive identity crises. They have to battle depression and addictions. People who work, creative people who work in any industrial environment, have additional challenges on top of that. They have to reconcile their artistic goals with the financial goals of the organization that they work for. They have to deal with the repetitive sort of factory-like work, assembly line work of not being able to touch do a whole big game, but just touch a small part of the game. And so they end up potentially becoming alienated from their project, where the person who makes the project no longer feels such a connection to the project or to the game that they can say, I made that game. That was my game. And so that feeling is kind of, we're losing that from the industry. So how can we fight this? What kind of methods can we bring to bring out the creativity in ourselves and in the people around us so that they become satisfied with their work? So how can we become more creative? So let's start with what creativity isn't. It's not a lightning bolt that strikes out of the blue. It's not a sudden inspiration that just comes to you. It's not a talent that a lucky few people are born with and leaves the rest of us out in the cold. Creativity isn't something that you can sit around and just wait for it to happen. So it's not magic. What I hope to do today is to give you a blueprint of how you can, in fact, become more creative. Thank you. So what creativity is a way of approaching problems. It's a method